Join us on Patreon and become part of our journey to uncover history's untold stories. Your support helps us create in-depth content, bring hidden narratives to life, and keep history alive for everyone.
The clash of civilizations on the North American continent during the colonial era was marked by violent encounters, land disputes, and resistance movements that shaped the history of the United States. While many narratives have documented the struggles between European settlers and indigenous tribes, a largely overlooked story lies in the resistance of black-skinned natives in the Carolinas who fought fiercely against British settlers. These indigenous peoples, who bore dark complexions, were not enslaved Africans but rather native inhabitants of the land who had long established their societies before the arrival of Europeans. Their resistance, driven by a deep connection to their homeland, an intricate understanding of guerrilla warfare, and a refusal to be subjugated, makes for a compelling and largely forgotten history. Their presence and defiance pose a significant challenge to British colonization efforts, which sought to claim and reshape the landscape of the Carolinas in the 17th and 18th centuries. These native groups, often misclassified or misrepresented in colonial records, employed sophisticated military strategies and political alliances to safeguard their sovereignty. The British, on the other hand, viewed them as obstacles to expansion, branding them as savages and rebels to justify their extermination or displacement. Yet, the tenacity of these black-skinned natives ensured that the struggle for their land and identity would not easily be extinguished. This article explores the origins, culture, and resistance of these black-skinned natives, shedding light on their pivotal role in the colonial history of the Carolinas. Through a detailed examination of historical accounts, oral traditions, and archaeological findings, we aim to reconstruct their story with as much historical accuracy as possible, challenging conventional narratives and restoring their place in history. Long before European explorers set foot on the shores of what is now the Carolinas, the region was home to diverse indigenous populations with rich cultural traditions. Among them were groups whose skin tones ranged from lighter brown to deep black, leading to early European descriptions of dark-skinned Indians. These communities had long-standing trade networks, complex social structures, and religious practices deeply tied to the land. Anthropologists and historians have debated their exact origins, with some theories suggesting possible African contact before European colonization, while others emphasize the natural diversity among indigenous peoples of the Americas. The Yamasee, Tuscarora, and other tribes in the region often included individuals who were described in colonial records as Negro-like in appearance, though they were distinctly native in language and customs. British settlers, unfamiliar with the diversity of indigenous peoples, often assumed that these dark-skinned natives were runaways from the transatlantic slave trade. This misconception led to an increase in the targeting of these populations for enslavement and land dispossession. By the late 1600s, the British Crown had granted charters for the establishment of the Carolina colonies, inviting settlers to claim land and cultivate cash crops such as tobacco and rice. This encroachment brought them into direct conflict with the native inhabitants, including the black-skinned groups who lived in the interior regions and coastal plains. Initially, interactions between the British and these natives were marked by trade, with settlers relying on indigenous knowledge to navigate the unfamiliar terrain and climate. However, as the British appetite for land grew, tensions escalated. The British employed various tactics to dispossess indigenous groups, including coercive treaties, deceitful land sales, and outright military force. They also sought to exploit divisions among native groups, forming alliances with certain tribes to undermine others. However, the black-skinned natives of the Carolinas were not easily subdued. They formed resistance movements that utilized their knowledge of the land to wage strategic warfare against British settlements. One of the earliest large-scale conflicts between indigenous groups and British settlers was the Tuscarora War, 1711 to 1715, in which black-skinned natives played a crucial role. Frustrated by British expansion, broken treaties, and the enslavement of their people, the Tuscarora and allied groups launched attacks on colonial settlements, targeting plantations and military outposts. These attacks were highly coordinated, with warriors utilizing hit-and-run tactics, ambushes, and knowledge of the terrain to outmaneuver British forces. In response, the British enlisted militias and allied native groups to counter the resistance, often resorting to brutal methods such as mass executions, village burnings, and forced removals. Despite being outgunned and outnumbered, the black-skinned natives held their ground for years, demonstrating remarkable resilience. Similar resistance continued into the Yamasee War 1715 to 1717, where native coalitions sought to push back against colonial expansion. These conflicts severely weakened British control over the region, forcing settlers to rely heavily on military reinforcements and economic incentives to suppress further uprisings. Despite their fierce resistance, the black-skinned natives of the Carolinas faced a gradual decline due to continuous warfare, forced displacement, and the expanding slave trade. Many were captured and sold into slavery in the Caribbean and other colonies, while others integrated into remaining indigenous communities or fled to more remote areas. The British eventually secured dominance over the region, but not without sustaining heavy losses and enduring decades of instability. The legacy of these black-skinned natives endures in the oral histories of indigenous tribes, as well as in the genetic makeup of modern Native American and African American communities in the Southeast. Their struggle highlights the complexity of racial and ethnic identities in early America and challenges simplistic narratives of European conquest. Today, scholars and descendants work to reclaim this history, ensuring that the story of these resilient peoples is not erased from the annals of history. The resistance of the black-skinned natives in the Carolinas against British settlers is a testament to the unyielding spirit of indigenous peoples who fought for their land and freedom. Their story, though obscured by colonial narratives, reveals a history of defiance, resilience, and cultural survival. By bringing this history to light, we honor their contributions and sacrifices, recognizing that their fight was not in vain. Their legacy lives on in the descendants who carry their heritage and in the ongoing efforts to preserve and celebrate their rich history.